Recording in progress.
Calling in via phone, press star 9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press star 6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for each specific item. For members of the public watching on YouTube who wish to provide live public comment, please note that you must join the meeting through the Zoom webinar using the access information listed on the agenda. And finally, we welcome speakers providing public comment, but please be advised this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item. If speakers fail to follow these rules, they will be warned, and if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended. Heleva, could you please read the consent calendar?
Item 1, Planning Commission meeting minutes. Approval. Approve the minutes of the regular meetings of 5/13/25, 10/28/25, and 12/9/25.
Is there any member of the commission who would like to pull any item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, if any members of the public wish to comment on any consent calendar item, now would be the time to make your comment. This is for consent calendar items only. Do we have any public commenters on this item?
Through the chair, it seems we have no public commenters via Zoom nor in person.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion and a second from the commission to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Heleva, could you please take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Shumkel,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Chair Patel,
Yes.
Chair Clafter,
Yes.
and Commissioner Bush.
Yes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the Planning Commission at this time. State law prevents the Commission from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. This public comment section is generally limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, that is subject to the Commission's discretion and can be extended if the Commission wishes to do so. If needed, an opportunity for additional public comment may be provided later in the agenda. Heleva, could you please tally the total number of requests to speak on the general public comment?
Through the chair, we have no public commenters at this time.
Okay, thank you. I will go ahead and close the general public comment. I understand that staff is requesting that we reorder tonight's discussion items. I will pass it over to Planning Manager Joanna Winter to briefly explain the change.
Yes, Madam Chair. In the interest of the applicant who is present at this meeting, staff is recommending that we take item number 3, 3399 CSM Drive special use permit for a new child care center in an existing church as our next discussion item.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion from the commission for this change. Is there a motion and a second from the commission to approve the reorder of the discussion items?
I'll make a motion to reorder the agenda for those items.
Second.
Thank you. Heleva, could you please call a roll call vote?
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Shumkle,
Yes.
Chair Patel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Clafter,
Yes.
and Commissioner Bush.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda, 399 CSM Drive, special use permit for a new child care center in an existing church. We will start with a staff presentation, an applicant presentation, and then public comments. Members of the public will be given 2 to 3 minutes to speak depending on the number of speakers. The applicant may also be given 5 minutes at the end to respond to the public comments. Once the public hearing is closed, the chair may ask staff to respond to any public comments, and the commission will ask questions and deliberate. Can we start with the staff presentation?
Through the chair, if we could take a brief second to confirm that our audio is being heard via Zoom and YouTube, please. Thank you.
Secret audience back there.
Thank you. Through the chair, we'll go ahead and continue.
Okay, thank you. I'll note one more thing. If a decision is made tonight, the decision of the Planning Commission can be appealed to the City Council within 10 calendar days.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Patel, Planning Commission, and members of the public. My name's El, and I'm an assistant planner. Joining us via Zoom is Selena Lau, Associate Engineer with Public Works. This is a public hearing for a special use permit at 3399 CSM Drive for a child daycare center within an existing church, planning application 2025-053. The project site outlined in blue near the black dots is located at 3399 CSM Drive. The site is near the San Mateo City College on the southwestern edge of the city. Surrounding uses include executive office to the north, 2 family dwellings to the east, and multifamily apartment to the west. And the southern area is unincorporated single-family residential. The project land use designation is quasi-public, and the site is zoned R1A for 1-family dwellings. The lot size is 87,405 square feet, and the existing use on the site is a church that is approximately 22,000 square feet. This request before you tonight is for the establishment of a child daycare center. The child daycare center would convert a portion of the church's ground floor into a daycare center. The facility would accommodate up to 60 students and 5 staff. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. This project will also update the conditions of approval for the existing church to reflect its current operations, as the previous conditions are outdated. The site will need to comply with the current building and fire codes as conditioned in Attachment 1, Exhibit A. For some background on the site, in 1978, the Planning Commission approved a planning application for a site development permit for grading, a site plan and architectural review for construction of the church campus, and a special use permit for the church use. Since then, the church has continued to operate as permitted in 1978. Next, I'd like to discuss the applicable codes and policies for this project. The slide provides an overview of the codes that apply to childcare centers in San Mateo. First, in order for a child care center to begin operating, they need to get their license from the state. The 2 primary types of child care programs that are licensed by the state are family child care homes and child care centers. Child care centers are larger daycares and churches, commercial buildings, or educational facilities. Under the R1 zone, child daycare centers located within a public or quasi-public structure, such as a faith-based institution, school, or similar facility, require a special use permit. Before receiving a state license, applicants must obtain a business license and approval from the City of San Mateo. The applicant has operated a child care center without a special use permit since 2017. While attempting to switch operators, the applicant learned that they needed a special use permit, which led them to this application. The general plan land use designation for the project site is quasi-public, which is intended for uses such as schools and faith-based institutions, aligning with what is there today. The proposed project provides a neighborhood-serving use, a child daycare center within a church and a residential zone, which is supported by general plan policies Land Use 3.5 and Public Service Facilities 6.5, which call out the need for more child care programs in San Mateo. A full list of applicable general plan policies, zoning code requirements, and a discussion of the project's conformance to them is included in the resolution and findings in Attachment 1. Going into more details on the site and development standards, the previously approved planning application for the existing church set the unique development standards and conditions of approval in PA 1978-005. The 2-acre site has 103 parking spaces and is developed with a 22,000 square foot church facility that includes a sanctuary, classrooms, kitchens, dressing rooms, music rooms, storage, and bathrooms. Additional features include an outdoor play area. The applicant proposes converting portions of the existing church into a child daycare. The converted spaces will be on the first floor, and they consist of a reception room and 5 classrooms that were previously approved as spaces for Sunday school as an accessory use for the church. This area makes up approximately 2,976 square feet of existing building area. The project includes 5 proposed loading and offloading spaces for the daycare use. I will go over the parking and loading spaces later when I discuss the parking requirements. Here are the photos of the existing building. The site is accessed off of CSM Drive, where one would see the front photo as shown. The play area is located towards the rear side of the building and is surrounded by a 3-foot tall fence. A special use permit is required for the following actions: establishing a child daycare center within the R1 zoning district and updating the conditions of approval for the church to reflect its current operations. The proposed child daycare center meets the standards and conditions outlined in the zoning code and is not expected to adversely affect the general health, safety, or welfare of the surrounding neighborhood. Findings and conditions of approval are included in Attachment 1. Next, I will discuss the parking requirements. The existing church use requires 44 parking spaces. The proposed daycare use requires 11 parking spaces and 6 loading spaces per the zoning code parking standard. The loading requirement may be reduced by 1 if there is staff assisting children during drop-off and pickup times. The site has 103 on-site parking spaces and proposes to provide 5 loading spaces. Staff will assist children during drop-off pickup times, reducing the loading requirement by 1. As part of the parking analysis, it was determined that surplus parking is available to accommodate the proposed child daycare facility and the existing church use, exceeding the required parking requirement by 48 spaces. Next, I will talk about the traffic analysis. The applicant prepared a parking and traffic operations plan for the project, which is included in Attachment 5. Vehicle access is provided via CSM Drive. Daycare staff will direct traffic to circle the property as shown here with the red arrows. The plan includes 5 designated drop-off and pickup locations around the property, shown here with the blue arrows. The operations plans incorporate staggered start and end times and ensures that staff escort students safely to and from the building. This next slide gives an overview of the traffic analysis requirements. There are 2 types of traffic analysis required. The first is a vehicle miles traveled analysis that addresses transportation impacts under CEQA, and the second is a local transportation analysis that evaluates traffic congestion and operations under general plan policies. The project is screened out of the VMT analysis pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15064.3, which allows cities to set local thresholds for VMT analysis. The city determined that local serving retail and public service uses of 50,000 square feet or less are exempt from VMT analysis. The project qualifies as a local serving use that is less than 50,000 square feet, and therefore it is exempt from the VMT analysis. For the LTA, Public Works evaluated the estimated trip generation And given the limited number of peak hours, trips, and the fact that the applicant will implement a traffic control plan and all circulation is accommodated on site, the project is not expected to substantially affect nearby street operations. The project is estimated to generate 47 peak hour AM and PM trips. The closest major intersection to the project site is Hilda Boulevard and Clearview Way, and the added number of vehicle trips is unlikely to have a significant impact on the intersection since it is operating well below the acceptable level of delay. If any queuing issues arise on site or in the adjacent streets, then the city may require modification to the daycare's operations as conditioned in Attachment 1, Exhibit A, Condition Number 22. Based on these findings, it is concluded that the project does not have an adverse impact on the local street system. This project has been determined to be categorically exempt from further environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines, Section 15301, Class 1 existing facilities. The project involved the conversion of approximately 2,976 square feet of existing space for a child daycare within a church, which is allowed with approval from a special use permit. The proposed project does not authorize any physical development, demolition, grading, or land disturbance. Therefore, it is exempt from further environmental review from further environmental analysis under Class 1 existing facilities. This project held a neighborhood meeting on June 23rd, 2025, prior to submitting the planning application. 2 community members attended the meeting and raised concerns related to traffic. For tonight's meeting, staff has completed all standard noticing procedures listed on the slide. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the special use permit for the establishment of a child daycare center within an existing church, subject to the findings for approval and conditions of approval, and find it exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15301. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions that the Planning Commission may have. The applicant for this entitlement, Western Hills Church, is also here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we have our presentation from the applicant next?
Thank you. I'm Scott Dunford, the pastor of Western Hills Church. And a special thank you to Elle for all your help in getting us through this process. Western Hills Church was started 79 years ago out of the commitment of 7 people who met in downtown San Mateo. In November of 1947, they started the church as Central Baptist Church of San Mateo. In 1955, they bought a property on 38th and 39th Street, and then eventually in 1962 purchased the property where by 1978 the ground was broken. They've been in this community a long time. Our motto is Jesus is over everything, and we want that to be true in the way we think, believe, and act. And it's our hope and prayer that one day we would be such a blessing to the city of San Mateo that the community couldn't imagine what the city would do without our involvement. And obviously we know we're not there yet. Some of you, this is the first time you're ever hearing about our church. But we do want to be a blessing at the size we are right now. We have an amazing location. The community is already taking advantage of that as dozens of people walk our property every single day. We have men's and women's gatherings, building community. We have college worship nights where students from CSM and surrounding campuses gather for food, music, and community. We have Korean and Arabic ministries and cultural events. And as we grow, we want to be able to do more. We understand that San Mateo has prioritized its commitment to providing and developing approaches to increase the supply of childcare spaces within our community. And we also recognize the importance of quality childcare and preschool programs play in the development of our community. One of the areas that's important to us is that we wisely steward the facilities that God has given to us. We have an amazing children's wing that's only used by our church on Sundays. And we think that by being able to get the SVP and hosting a licensed preschool in that space, that we will not only have the funds to better minister to our community, but also see quality daycare, be able to meet the child care needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we will have public comment on this item. If there are any members of the public who wish to speak and are in person, please turn in your yellow speaker slip now. Any members of the public watching over Zoom who would wish to give a comment, please raise your hand now.
Through the chair, we have no public commenters.
Okay, thank you. I will go ahead and close the public comment on this item. And so since there's no public comment, we don't need 5 minutes to respond to the public comment. Now I will turn it over to my fellow commissioners to ask any questions they may have of staff or the applicant. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Commissioner Williams.
Yes, I do. Let's see. Well, I have a couple of questions. So there was reference in the packet and in the presentations about existing conditions of approval from, I guess, 1978 that weren't being maintained. Are they, I didn't see exactly, unless I missed them somehow, exactly what that was. And are they worth like noting what those conditions of approval are?
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, the old conditions of approval weren't as detailed, and they included like old building code standards and didn't really address like the church's operations. And so we figured that while we're already doing a special use permit for them, that we would update the conditions just so to incorporate the church uses.
Okay, that makes sense. And then another question I had, so it's my understanding that there is no need for a building permit after this, or I wasn't clear what physical changes there are proposed in the project,
Yeah,
or there will be in the future, I guess.
through the chair, the applicant will need to apply for a building permit in order to make modifications to the daycare space
Okay.
to be brought up to code. So yeah, they
Okay.
will.
Somehow I was under the impression that that wasn't necessary because the spaces are currently there, but they'll need to be brought up to code. Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Do any other commissioners have questions?
Yes, through the chair, I have a couple questions. About the fence for the play area. I know that there was a 6-foot requirement, but since it's locations in the back and kind of offset far from the adjacent properties, does that 3-foot fence suffice?
Thanks for your question. Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. Since the fence is outside of the required setbacks, then 3 feet is enough. Yeah, and it will be also reviewed during the building permit when building gets to look at it.
All right. And then for the one more question. I'm sorry. Did it turn me off all by itself? Okay. For the signage, I saw that I was kind of confused a little bit because on the conditions of approval, it says that there will be signage that have to get approved, but in the findings, number 8, it says that there wouldn't be. So I was just trying to get some clarification on if there would be signage or is there, I thought that was conflicting information the way I interpreted it.
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks for your question. That is a standard condition of approval that goes on all the PAs. But if you refer to the municipal code, it'll say that no signage is allowed for these daycares that are in residential zones. So it's just a standard condition, but they're not allowed to have any signage.
All right. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? No. All right. I do not have questions either. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any comments? Is that a yes from Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, thank you to planning staff, to Elle for the presentation, and thank you to the pastor for the presentation. The long history of the church was really interesting, actually. I had no idea of 1947. I think that was interesting. I think at this point, I mean, I agree that there's a great need for childcare options in San Mateo for people that live and work in San Mateo. I think that since there are children's spaces already there, and the goal is to bring those up to the current requirements, but current building codes, it makes sense to allow the project to go forward. There's not the space is there waiting, it sounds like, to be used. So I think I thought the condition of approval was kind of interesting, that that it would be reevaluated if drop off and pickup did not go smoothly. That, of course, as we just saw recently on another project for a childcare space, that is that's always the main concern, I guess, is how, the traffic and the children, safely get to and from spaces. So, so it sounds like it's, open to being reevaluated if that's not a smooth process, or if that routing doesn't work, it can be reevaluated. So I think that's an important condition of approval. Otherwise, I see that there's a need for childcare, and this looks like a great opportunity for it.
Commissioner Clafter?
No, I had no individual comments that I felt I needed to make. I generally would echo Commissioner Williams' position on the value of bringing more childcare opportunities into the city of San Mateo. Yes, that's about it.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamkol?
Yeah, going into this, my one concern was obviously the traffic impact, and seeing how it's set up as a perfect drive-through drop-off. I love how you guys have the entrance coming on and then wrapping around the property and coming back out the same exit. I think that puts that concern to rest. And I also feel that this is a much-needed service in our community for more childcare. And yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Bush?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. We've learned that the sound is not working for Zoom or YouTube, so could we take a brief
Yes.
recess? Thank you.
Yeah.
the sound.
catch anything. Hello. I'm just gonna keep the audio on. I mean, my mic on. See if it catches anything. Just don't say anything. Worker that will have guys ready.
We're showing you everything's ready.
Right. I mean, as a second meeting, they should have been at least the type of people. I mean, there's nothing that Martin then really could do. Here's Aaron.
It's interesting, like what is suggested when you're not logged into your YouTube account. You're like, ooh, what's
Oh, I hate when everyone sees my YouTube account. Like, I made that.
Oh yeah. I don't like that either, but when I'm not logged in,
Like the.
it's like, whoa, this is what the channel will see.
What sucks is that they didn't even get to get approved yet or not. Sorry, guys. I wonder if the Comcast, if the TV is recorded.
Oh, if it's like listening to us talk like that.
Oh, it was on. Thanks for reminding me. Oh, so Aaron hears us talking. Oh, that's the Comcast. Hopefully this works. Oh, sorry. Oh, you're throwing all my things on your side.
Here, no, it's fine.
Testing. 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 Can you hear me? Testing. Hello. Testing.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay. Ginger, do you mind testing too? Because I don't know if Martin will be able to call me because I have Zach's 5 minutes left. Testing. 3, 2, 1. Testing. Testing. 3, 2, 1. Testing. 1, 2. Nothing. Testing.
Great.
Through the chair, we can resume our meeting.
Thank you so much. We will go ahead and resume with commission comments on the childcare facility item. I believe Commissioner Schunkel, you are about to give any comments if you had any.
No further comments.
Great. Commissioner Bush?
Yeah, can we take a 5-minute break? I don't have any comments, thanks.
I do not have any specific comments, but again, I wanted to thank the applicant for what they're doing, using a facility they have that is currently unused during the week for childcare services. As several folks have mentioned, we have a lack of childcare services in San Mateo, and as a parent myself, it has been very difficult to find childcare, especially for infants and preschool age children, and it's one of the big priorities in our general plan. And so I'm very appreciative that we have an applicant here today that wants to set up a childcare facility. So those are my only comments on this item. Would any commissioner like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution to approve the planning application for the establishment of a child daycare center within an existing church, subject to the findings for approval and conditions of approval, and find it exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15301.
Second.
Helena, could you please take a roll call vote?
Vice Chair Clafter,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush, Chair Patel,
Yes.
Commissioner Schunkel,
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0. I will go ahead and close this item.
Thank you. That's great.
Through the chair, we now have item 2, which is general plan amendments to adopt San Mateo's 2023 to 2021 amended housing element.
Thank you. We will start with the staff presentation and then public comments. Members of the public are given 2 to 3 minutes to speak, depending on the number of speakers. The applicant may also be given 5 minutes at the end to respond to the public comments. I guess in that case, that would be the city. Once the public hearing is closed, the chair may ask staff to respond to any public comments, and the commission will ask clarifying questions, deliberate, and render a decision. Finally, if a decision is made tonight, the decision of the Planning Commission can be appealed to the City Council within 10 calendar days, although I believe this item we will just be making a recommendation. Whenever you're ready, can we have the staff presentation? Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, Chair Patel and Commissioners. I'm Steve Golden, Principal Planner with the Planning Division. I'm here to present this item, which is the housing element amendments. And with a delay, you want me to go to the last slide, right? Just straight to the recommendations? No. Okay. So I know some of you are intimately familiar with the housing element. Other of you may not be. So I'll go through a brief background. I'm also going to highlight the housing element implementation action items that the city has achieved since the approval of the housing element, and then get into the specifics of the housing element amendments. So just a quick background: in California, the housing element is one of 8 required elements in our general plan, and the San Mateo 2023 to 2031 housing element provides a plan to accommodate the city's regional housing needs allocation, or otherwise known as RHNA. It's 7,015 new housing units. And to do that, we're supporting the production of housing at all income levels, and to to affirmatively further fair housing. After a multi-year process, the City of San Mateo housing element was approved and adopted by City Council on May 20th of 2024, and it was certified by California Department of Housing and Community Development, otherwise known as HCD, on July 23rd, 2024. There's 5 goals to support the compliance with the state law and to achieve the city's RHNA numbers. Those are supporting production, preservation, protection, promotion, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. There are 53 policies and somewhere around the range of 150 implementation action items. And we've already done numerous housing element policies and programs that require zoning code amendments and other policy amendments. So I just want to go through a few slides to identify those implementation highlights. So before the housing element was adopted, back in November of 2023, the city amended the zoning code to increase the threshold for residential projects up to 25 units to be approved administratively. And the city also adopted our objective design standards for multifamily projects. And then in July of 2024, as part of the housing element adoption, the city adopted a by right designation for housing sites that are reusing housing sites from the prior housing elements, and for projects that propose a minimum of 20% affordable units. And then in April of 2025, the council adopted 2 ordinances to implement a variety of housing element implementation programs, and also to make the zoning code more consistent with state housing laws. And they included adopting a measure to increase the threshold from the 25 units all the way up to 99 units to be approved administratively. And the council also added a section in the zoning code for general plan and Measure T consistency, which addressed a number of policies. And then in June of 2025, there were a number of zoning code amendments that the council approved. A big effort was to streamline the development review process, which adds certainty for developers. These included adding an appeals process when the department determines a project is incomplete. The council approved 2 2-year extensions, so that increased the allowances up to 6.5 years to start construction when a project gets entitled. And the council approved furthering streamlining efforts that projects would only require council approval when they're over General Plan 2040 height limits. The council also adopted new requirements for minimum densities in mixed-use residential projects. That was for projects that included 5 or more residential units, and they adopted minimum densities of 10 to 30 dwelling units per acre for the minimum for mixed-use projects. And lastly, during that time, they updated the city's below market rate housing program, which is also called the inclusionary program, and they specifically added an alternative for on-site affordable housing. And then at the end of the year in November, the council did a number of measures for tenant protections. They developed an emergency rental assistance program. This included financing of $168,000, which is going to set the stage for one of the amendments to our implementation plan. They also added a new code to the municipal code, a new section to the municipal code, which is called the Residential Tenant Protection Program. This extended the state law for relocation assistance for no-fault evictions with tenants that have a tenure of less than a year. And they also required a notification for the right of return. And then finally, under tenant protections, the council adopted an ordinance to strengthen the city's ability to aid and support tenants displaced from unsafe or substandard units. And then last night was the first reading, and there'll be a second reading for an amendment to the ADU ordinance, which the Planning Commission also reviewed. And that's aligning the local ADU regulations with state law. We resolved inconsistencies identified by HCD, and it affirmed local processes that allow ADUs that exceed minimum requirements under state law. So those were all of kind of a highlight of the implementation actions that the city has taken. But going back, and despite all of these achievements in implementing the housing element, when the city adopted the housing element, the Housing Action Coalition filed a lawsuit against the city, claiming that the housing element did not satisfy state law because sites listed on the site's inventory were not likely to serve as a location for future housing construction. So the city reached an agreement, a settlement agreement with HAC, the Housing Action Coalition, to address specific changes in the housing element. That was done in July of 2025. So we agreed to amend the housing element to remove certain sites from the sites inventory. We were allowed to recalculate site capacities based on densities in General Plan 2040 and Measure T. This specifically increased the densities from a maximum of 50 units up to 99 or 130 units per acre, depending on the general plan land use designations. Also, since the housing element was approved, the city has experienced significant number of proposed housing development projects with approximately 5,000 units in the pipeline. And these new developments are proposed at much higher densities than the previous projects. So there was a recognition and agreement with HAC to increase the realistic capacity up to 90% of the allowed density. We also identified additional sites that were excluded from no net loss sites, and there were some questions about what is no net loss. So just to further define that a little bit for the commission, no net loss is a measure to ensure development opportunities remain available through the planning period to accommodate a jurisdiction's regional housing needs allocation, and it's especially done for low and moderate income households. I'll show you our recalculated housing sites inventory, and you'll see that we include a buffer, and that's the amount over the RENA numbers that that we accommodated in the housing element. So to ensure that we're accommodating and satisfying all the regional housing needs. And then finally, the agreement allowed us to add new sites to the inventory, including new application or what's called pipeline projects in the housing element. Okay, so that was our agreement. And this slide just kind of shows how the components of the proposed housing elements, what those are. I'll go into most of these in a little bit more detail in the next slides. I will say that number 4, removal of non-active projects from pipeline projects. I don't have a specific slide on there, but there was projects like the 2 housing projects on Fremont that, because they became inactive, we pulled them out of being pipeline projects, but they do remain in the housing sites inventory. And then also just kind of a high level review of other amendments that we made. These were specific to implementation action items that were updated. The first one is updates to the implementation action items for policy H3.1, which was to reflect the city council, their recent establishment of that emergency rental assistance program. So moving forward, the council or the city will allocate $150,000 annually into that fund. The second one is updates to actions under policy H3.4 and H5.4.1 to have internal consistency to better align with the recent council action on tenant protections. And then finally, an update to policy H1.2, which gives the city flexibility during budget deficit conditions from being required to set aside 20% of the general fund property taxes for use for affordable housing development. Okay, so I'll go into a little bit of detail on the other proposed amendments. So consistent with the housing, the settlement agreement with AJC, we updated the housing opportunity sites inventory to remove the following 7 sites: the Bridgepoint Shopping Center, Parkside Plaza Shopping Center, Boral Shopping Center, the site which is called Consolidated Site H, 150 West 20th Avenue, Villa Plaza, and the downtown parking lots. This original list was in the settlement agreement was 9 sites, but you'll see in the next slide we got requests by 2 of the owners to remain in the housing sites inventory, but they're considered as part of the no net, or they're excluded from the no net loss sites. So still within our housing sites, not considered part of the no net loss sites. So these are the sites that we agreed with HAC to remain in the inventory, but again, not count towards no net loss. So the county office building, the atrium, 1650 Boral Place, the Mateo Shopping Center, and Bright Horizons Preschool. And those were the 2 that were requested to remain in the inventory by the property owner. We added several sites to the inventory. There were at the time when we were going through the update or the amendments, we had 7 additional pipeline projects, or those were preliminary or formal projects for new housing development projects. We captured a point in time, so there's actually more projects now that would be considered pipeline projects because they've submitted applications, but we're not continually adding pipeline projects into the housing element. And then the 8th site is the former Marriott site on Amphlett Boulevard, and this is considered a brand new housing opportunity site, and that was a site that was identified in the settlement agreement to be included. So with the changes with the voter approved measure T, there was a greater focus and increased growth near transit, downtown, and other target areas, and we increased the potential residential development in the city by approximately 20,000 units. And so we made a lot of changes in the housing element to reflect the voter approved measure T. And along with measure T, there was increase of densities from 35 to 50 units per acre to the 99 to 130 units per acre. So you can see some of the sites. These are many of the pipeline projects where those increased densities were reflected in the housing element. We also, in this table, reflects, the realistic capacity calculation that we did. And so basically looking at the sites that were pipeline projects, and we calculated what's the first column in red, which is the percent of base density. And so if you average out these projects, there was an average of 122% of the base density being proposed by the pipeline projects. So this confirmed another agreement as part of the settlement agreement, the use of the realistic capacity of 90% of base density. Previously, it ranged from 75% to 90%, but we were able to use the 90% because we showed the new pipeline projects were that much more of base density. I will answer one question by a commissioner that I wasn't able to answer this afternoon, and that's with regards to the Hillsdale Mall project and also the site at 3000 Clearview. We did not include those in the realistic capacity calculation, primarily for the Hillsdale site, the Hillsdale Mall site. It was really an outlier. It's a much larger site than most sites in San Mateo. It doesn't really reflect the other potential projects that are going to come in. It's a very unique project in itself. The Clearview project at 3000 Clearview up by the college was a site that came in as a preliminary application in October, and we had already gone through these calculations to calculate the realistic density. Also, it's a site that the applicant is only using 13 acres of a total of 22 acres. Very unique site. It doesn't really reflect, if we had included or thought about including it, it doesn't really reflect future projects that we'll likely see in San Mateo. That being said, even if you threw in the Clearview project, not the Hillsdale Mall project, the estimated or the realistic capacity would be calculated above 100% still. Okay, so with all of the changes that we made in the housing element, we came up with the new numbers, and this is a summary of the sites inventory. So this includes removal of all those sites in the inventory, the addition of new sites, the changes to the pipeline projects because of the new applications coming in, voter approval of Measure T, changes to the realistic capacities, and so the number on the left-hand side is the total units. Our RENA again being 7,015. If you look at the pipeline projects and our estimated number of ADUs over the period, the remaining RENA numbers would be 2,228. Our opportunity sites, excluding those no net loss sites, is a total of 7,362, which is 230% over the remaining RENA numbers. We do have to look at all income levels, so we made sure that the buffer was sufficient for all income levels. So you can see at the lowest end at the moderate rate levels was 32% over the buffer remaining over the RENA numbers, and the above moderate rate was at the highest end of the scale at 484% above the buffer over the remaining RENA. We did notice this for public review in compliance with state law, which required a 7-day review. That was done in October, and we didn't receive any comments to the housing element amendments. Subsequently, we, again, per state law, we submitted our amendments to HCD. They have up to 60 days to complete the review, and they responded to us in December that the housing element amendments were in substantial compliance with the housing element law, pending council adoption of the amendments. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council adoption of a resolution to approve the amendments to the general plan's housing element for the six cycle housing element that is compliant with state law, provides a plan for at least 7,015 new housing units and affirmatively further fair housing. We also recommend to the Planning Commission that you recommend to the City Council that the housing element amendments are categorically exempt under the common sense exemption under the CEQA guidelines section 1501B3. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Before questions, I'm going to go ahead and open this item for public comment. If there are any members of the public watching remotely that would like to give a public comment, please raise your hand now.
Through the chair, there is no public comment.
Okay, thank you. I will go ahead and close public comment on this item. So now I'll pose that to my fellow commissioners. Is there anyone who has any questions on this item that they would like to ask? Commissioner Williams.
I always take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions. So thanks for the presentation. I guess I just want to understand, what planning looks forward to in the future at this point. So there was, this lawsuit and the housing element appears to be sort of a live document with, as projects develop or get proposed or canceled or modified. And so is that sort of the way this is to be expected, that it's a, kind of continually evolving process, or do you kind of have this expectation that it's set at some point? And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm wondering, from like the developer or the applicant's point of view, does this allow for the developer to make adjustments to the program or to the, to the design or to the plans in general? Like, how much flexibility do they have? It's kind of a big question, I guess, but I don't know. Just wanted
through the chair. So I think the first question is, with the settlement agreement, can we put the lawsuit behind us? My understanding is after council adoption of the housing element amendments and submitted the housing element to the state HCD and getting their certification, then essentially that does put that behind us. I believe there's some clauses that they will not seek any further
I did see that.
challenges to the city, so long as we implement the plan, per the implementation plan and the timeline. As you kind of were alluding to, we have been, and I provided in the slides, we've been doing a whole lot of changes to zoning code, streamline our process, looking at tenant protections. All of the 150 implementation action items will continue to do that. I guess as far as maybe your question is, housing, like these amendments that we're proposing, are we looking forward in the future to doing more amendments? I would say no. Developers are still submitting plans per our general plan, per development standards in the zoning code, and that will continue. One benefit with, in particular to San Mateo, was, and we had language included in the housing element with regards to Measure T, and that came to fruition. So that increased the density, and actually, there was a positive benefit to our the buffers, the numbers in the sites inventory. But moving forward, we're looking forward to implementing more of the action items in our plan.
Well, and I guess just to follow up on that, so are developers held to the number, strictly? Because, first of all, they're not, I'm assuming they're not specifically held to the number of units. And also, I know how projects change over time as they get developed by the, designers and the owners and the users. And
Yeah, through the chair, there's actually state law that recognizes we can't hold developers, we can't deny a project if they came in with a project that was under the number of sites that we estimated in the sites inventory. And that's why we have the buffer, to ensure that if a project comes in less than what we estimated, there are remaining sites throughout the city that can take on those number of units, and also at the income levels, the low and moderate rate unit income levels, which is required per state law. If we were to take on, or if developers were to propose projects that were so far under the capacities that we estimated, we would then have to go back through an amendment process. I believe there's like a 180-day allowance for coming back through an amendment process. I think, given the recent projects that have been submitted, looking at the table or that we provided you with the realistic capacities, we're seeing projects that are way above densities in the general plan, primarily through the density bonus process. Mm-hmm. So we don't expect too many projects coming in under what we've estimated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. No further.
Should we just go down the line? Commissioner Clafter, do you have any questions?
I didn't have any questions earlier, but I was just listening to your presentation and looking again at the list of the preliminary applications, the formal applications, and one of the ones that was on the list was 22 North San Mateo, and I just remembered all of a sudden that I had seen that was withdrawn in December. And I don't know if that has any effect on this document today.
Through the chair. So that is a sort of decision, or we had to take a point in time, like what were pipeline projects. So that project, unfortunately, is not moving forward. But likewise, we have other projects that have come in since we've come to this draft of the housing element. So we'll continue to get more projects submitted, but we won't go back and amend the housing element. But I should say that any project that is on a site that wasn't part of the housing element, we still get credit when those building permits are issued. We'll get credit towards our arena.
Yes.
Through the chair, I'm just following up on that. I think it's important to view the site's inventory a bit as a living document because it's evolving. We need to maintain our buffer. Projects come in. They may propose a mix that's greater or less than what's anticipated, different mix of affordability. And that's really then gets picked up in our annual progress report that we submit to HCD each year. And so that's kind of our tracking mechanism. And we wouldn't necessarily need to make amendments to the housing element as that list evolves and changes over time.
And
great.
Sorry, one more thing through the chair. We are working on a dashboard for the housing element to show the production. We put it a little bit on hiatus while this amendment was moving forward, but we are working on that, and it will be available on the website for the public to look at that, in addition to the APRs, or the annual progress reports that go to the state every year.
I think that was my only question.
Great. Commissioner Shamkol, any questions?
Yes, just a couple questions. Is there a state required or mandated buffer that we have to meet or exceed?
Through the chair, there's not a mandate, but there's recommendations from HCD. There's a whole playbook that HCD put together in the 6-cycle housing element that all jurisdictions were required to go through. So there's a recommendation. I think there's talks about maybe changing that for the next cycle, but it's one of those where we have to kind of figure out, how many sites do we add, because the next cycle coming around, we don't know what the arena numbers are, but should we reserve certain sites for the next cycle? So I'll just leave it at that.
That's a perfect segue into my next question. So let's say we meet or specifically exceed our arena numbers. Do we get any adjustment or some type of relief or reduction in the next cycle?
The simple answer is no. So I know of a jurisdiction who achieved the arena, maybe surpassed it in like the first year, and they asked the state, and no, the answer was you get your arena in the next cycle and you have to show how you're going to produce that number of units in the next cycle.
Sorry, I said I had a couple. I lied. More than a couple. Thank you. For shortfalls on arena numbers, I know there's funding mechanisms that are tied to hitting your target. Are there practical examples or cities that have actually felt the consequences of not meeting their arena numbers? And
through the chair, I think the answer would be that the housing element requires us to show the policies and that the city is putting forth a plan that essentially it takes developers to build the housing units, right? So we have to show that there's enough capacity, and we've identified sites to do that. In some cities, fortunately, San Mateo didn't have to do any zoning code updates to increase densities or things like that. But those are actions that the city would have to take to show that it can meet its RENA. I don't know off the top of my head, I'm kind of turning to our city attorney about if there's consequences once you have a housing element adopted and certified by HCD. I don't think there's any consequences if we don't reach
There are
arena.
not.
Yeah.
There's penalties if you don't have a certified housing element, and there's penalties if you don't complete your rezonings on time, but there are no penalties if you don't meet your target.
And again, my take, and I think it's the developers are the ones that build housing. Cities generally don't do that. So we have to show how to achieve it, but actually getting there is what developers do.
thank you. And then for my last question, for the lawsuit, in regards to that, were there any other components or grounds that were inside that lawsuit that they could possibly still bring up, or was it just the 7 or 9 sites that they had said that were not really viable sites?
I can go back through the chair. I can go back to this slide. This is kind of a summary. So it all these bullet points kind of summarize what the settlement agreement was about. So it wasn't just the sites inventory there. That was a major factor in the settlement agreement, but there were other sort of factors, but it did resolve around some of the methodology of how the sites inventory was put together.
Thank you. No further questions.
Commissioner Bush.
Yes, thanks. Does this have to go back to, do these amendments have to go back to the public for approval? Like the general plan amendments needed to be approved, right? The general plan needs to be approved by the public, by vote of the people. The public, am I saying that right?
So through the chair, so the process right now is the planning commission needs to make a recommendation to the city council. The council would take action on a general plan amendment for the housing element. And then once it's approved by the city council, we would send it to HCD, who would then, they have a timeline to certify the document. At this point, we've already gotten their concurrence that their review letter said that we're in substantial compliance with state law, subject to city council adoption. So we presume that once the city council adopts it, it's sent to HCD that they'll certify it.
Got it. Okay.
And just kind of building on what Steve said, I think you were thinking of how we adopted the general plan and then Measure T still went to the voters. That was related to the voter approved growth limit. So just the portions of the general plan that were regulated by Measure Y, that previous growth. So the general plan itself didn't require voter approval, but the components that were related to the past voter approval, that's what was included as part of Measure T.
I see. Thank you. Yes, that was.
And sorry, through the chair, not to complicate it more, but the previous housing element was actually didn't consider approval of Measure T. So it relied on old densities of what Measure Y had.
Okay, got it. Thank y'all. Thank you for clarifying that. Are there proposed edits here that are not required by the settlement agreement? It seemed like from this slide here that almost all of these, if not all of the kind of main bullet points from the agenda report demonstrate that it was pursuant to the settlement agreement, but that perhaps there may be some minor edits and things that aren't required by the settlement agreement. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I would agree with the commissioner's statement. There was just consistency with, there's language with Measure T that we needed to update kind of in the housing element document itself. We took this opportunity to update these implementation action items, which were not part of the settlement agreement. I mean, we were trying to focus on really just the settlement agreement and these specific implementation action items.
Okay, for number 3 on the slide here, which seems to me to be really like the only change in kind of policy that you're proposing that wasn't part of the settlement agreement, is there some underlying rationale for like what spurred this particular proposed amendment? I mean, other than kind of the obvious that it's helpful to have flexibility in times of budget deficit, but.
Through the chair, I'll let Director Dahl maybe help answer that question.
Yes. So as we are looking through the actions, you can see some of these were updated to reflect the actions that took place and to align with where we were. I think the key with this policy 1.2 was to recognize that given where our funds were and that the variability of our budget, we wanted to get some flexibility here. And so we did review that. HCD did not raise any concerns with this. And so the goal is to still meet the intent, but give us flexibility during deficit conditions to make decisions that were dynamic and reflective of the highest and best needs of the city.
So it's sort of changed circumstances, or at least maybe different budget projections since when we first adopted the housing element, kind of lent itself to thinking about how to be more flexible if we do have a budget deficit.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. My questions were around the inclusion of the Hillsdale Mall and 3000 Clearview on that Table A calculation, which you just answered. So thank you for that. So moving on to any comments or discussion. I'll go down the line again. I'm picking on you first all the time today, but Commissioner Williams, do you have any comments?
Well, I guess I guess what I've been making a couple notes, and I just want to say that in support of the work that planning, can you guys hear me? Okay, that planning department does, and I guess to some extent planning commission as well, because we worked on the housing element changes. I just want to note, kind of for the record, I mean, it's clear, but that this was brought about by a lawsuit from the Housing Action Coalition, which is an outside organization. And they sued the city to get changes made to what was the approved City of San Mateo housing element. I understand that the goal was to amend it so that it reflects the actual conditions of 2025 and 2026, I guess, but since it was approved in 2024. But, you know, it's a lot of work on your part. And I guess I just want to note that, you know, it was, I'm not saying they're good changes that you've worked through. And I just want to recognize that this lawsuit brought about a lot of work for what was an approved document. The good news is that these changes still provide a substantial buffer, well over our RENA numbers, as already had. And so it, I guess, like I said, it's kind of a live document and it continues to improve, but not without a lot of effort. So thank you for all of that.
Commissioner Clafter, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's looking at the numbers. You know, it's speaking of a lot of work. You know, it's remarkable the number of units in the pipeline that have appeared in the last little over a year here, and you know, that represents a lot of time that will be spent and has been spent already working on those projects, and it hopefully will become actual units that people can live in. And you know, I think it speaks to the. I know a lot of these applications came in after the passage of Measure T and after these various policies were finalized previously. And so I think it speaks to a positive reaction on the part of applicants to all of that work. So, you know, I appreciate that this, you know, these changes, these fixes to the you know, in response to this lawsuit, are going to continue to maintain, you know, additional capacity, and it'll be interesting to see how many additional projects continue to come in.
Commissioner Shamko, any comments?
Yeah, just also want to echo my fellow commissioners and thanking everyone for their hard work, and where the rubber meets the road, you guys have been there and done the work and laid it all out. It's good to see that we have a clear bill of health from the HCD, that we're in substantial compliance still, even with these amendments. And yeah, that's it.
Commissioner Bush?
Yeah, thanks. Nothing much more to add other than thanks for all the hard work on implementing basically what's required under the settlement agreement. I think my only substantive comment is that I think the recommendation to change the policy H1.2 that we were talking about, which currently under the housing element, if I'm reading it correctly, says, let me pull up the current version, hold on. Right now, the housing element says continue to set aside 20% of general fund property tax revenues from former RDAs for affordable housing. I'm summarizing. And the proposed change is when city budgetary conditions do not anticipate a deficit, consider setting aside 20% of general fund property tax revenues. So I think that's like actually a somewhat significant change. And so I would just, to the extent where we're making recommendations to council, I would be in favor of calling that out a little bit more so that there's a actual reflection on that particular proposal as a, unless I'm misunderstanding it in some way, as a, you know, a not insignificant change. But that would be that's my only comment.
Thank you. I agree with that comment. I do have some comments about this, and particularly around the calculation of the realistic capacities. So I was a little bit, I wanted to pause and think a little bit as I read through the materials about the decision to increase the calculation of the realistic capacities from 75% of the base density to 90% of the base density. And I think what gave me a little bit of pause is that we're 25% through the housing element cycle right now, and we're kind of in a period of economic times where lower density housing is penciling more than higher density housing. And so we've seen a few changes come in. Bayshore Commons, when they first came to us in the general plan process, they actually asked us to increase the density of their site to mixed use medium. But when they actually came in a few years later and submitted a project, they submitted a project for townhomes and single family homes. And then we saw Concar Passage submit a new application that decreased the number of units by 114. And so I was a little bit thinking like some of these projects that are coming in lower than we expected. And then when I considered the two projects that weren't included, Hillsdale Mall and Clearview Way, it was considering Hillsdale Mall, the average density drops to 114% of base density from 122. And I wasn't sure how to include 3000 Clearview Way because the land use is actually office medium. And so I wasn't sure what the base residential density of an office medium designation was. But if you take a step back and you look at that whole portfolio of projects and you look at the total number of units proposed in that set of projects and the total number of acres in that set of projects, your density is actually at 45 units an acre. So for the sites that are zoned 50 units an acre, 45 units an acre, that's 90%. That's right on the money. But for the sites that are zoned 99 units an acre or 130 units an acre, that 45 number is quite a bit lower. And I hear what you said, that those two sites are kind of outliers. They're much bigger than the typical site. They're 22 acres and 33 acres. It's much larger than we would expect any other project to be. But it just gave me pause. And so I guess my question is, it sounds like from what you said in the presentation that the actual 90% number is part of the settlement agreement, which means presumably HAC is okay with that and then HCD is okay with that. Is that right?
The realistic capacity, I don't believe that was a settlement agreement term, but we had to update our realistic capacity to meet HCD requirements. And I guess I would like to highlight, there's three groupings of sites that you look at, and each one can have a different realistic capacity. You've kind of got your up to half acre sites, your half acre to 10 acre sites, and your 10 plus acre sites. Yeah. And HCD actually looks differently at those 10 plus acre sites. And I think what you're highlighting are all 10 plus acre sites. If you look at our sites that are between half acre and 10 acres, I think we've got a strong case to make that we're well over 100% of base density. And that really represents the vast majority of project sites that we'll see in and around San Mateo. And so that was the case we made HCD, and they were on board with taking that approach.
Okay, great. I think if they're on board with this, I'm on board with this. So that makes sense to me. Did you want to add something?
Well, I'll just clarify. There is an agreement in the settlement agreement about using 90%, but we have to clearly demonstrate it. So that's what we did in the changes.
Okay, great.
But there is recognition from HAC to use up to 90%.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, that was my only comment. So are there any other comments from commissioners? No. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the City Council adoption of a resolution to approve amendments to the general plan's housing element for the 6th housing cycle that is compliant with state law, provides a plan for at least 7,015 new housing units, affirmatively furthers fair housing. Did you want a separate motion for? Okay. And also recommend to the City Council that the housing element amendments are categorically exempt under the common sense exemption under the CEQA guidelines section 15061B3.
I'll second.
Before we take a vote, I'm not sure if this requires 3 people to have said they were interested, but Chair Patel said that she was interested in my recommendation, which is not a recommendation to council, but is instead a recommendation to staff to highlight the policy change a little bit more substantively in the presentation. I was just hoping before we vote on the motion to see if there were 3 of us in agreement with that.
I am.
Yes. I think it would be something to just say. I don't know how we would phrase that recommendation.
It's a recommendation to staff. We'll just ask staff to highlight it in their materials and presentation to council. Yeah.
Just to highlight it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to clarify, the motion would be as depicted on the slide with a supplemental staff recommendation to highlight
policy change.
Correct.
And yeah, and I wasn't even necessarily suggesting that we do a motion on the staff recommendation. I thought it was more informally.
That would be my recommendation for something like that. Yeah, I think that's following the action. You could provide that suggestion to staff.
Okay,
I think
great.
it's in alignment with our plan anyway.
So we could take the
Okay,
action
great.
and then we
Yes.
can.
I think we can have a roll call vote on the motion that has been seconded.
And for the vote, Commissioner Shumkle,
Yes.
Vice Chair Clafter,
Yes.
Chair Patel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes with a 5-0 vote. And yes, thank you to staff for all of the work to get this done. Hopefully put behind us. Yeah, thank you. All right, next item is reports and announcements. Do we have any reports and announcements from our staff or the city attorney?
Yes, Madam Chair, we wanted to give you some updates on the next Planning Commission meeting. Tentatively on the agenda, we have 2 different housing projects. Gateway, which is 668 East 3rd, and Bayshore Commons, which is 1650 to 1720 South Amphlett Boulevard. So those are tentatively on the agenda for February 10th.
I'm sorry, what was the second address that you?
1650 to 1720 South Amphlett,
Yeah.
Bayshore Commons, which was mentioned recently. Yes. And then we also wanted to give you an update. There were a lot of CDD items, planning items on the council agenda yesterday. Yesterday, the council held a study session on the historic preservation ordinance update and gave some direction to staff on moving forward with the revisions to the draft ordinance. I maybe turn it over to Zach in a moment if he wants to add some details on that, but provided some detail on sort of process for moving forward with a historic district, percentage of owners in a district required, so a number of different items. They also held a hearing on the ADU amendments that you had seen before, and so they had their first reading, and they had the first reading for adoption of those. And then also just it was on the consent calendar, but it was the second reading of the Cary School Daycare Center, which you had also heard. So Zach, I don't know if you want to give some more details.
Sure. Just kind of looking more, we do have this historic policy update effort, which was kicked off beginning of last year, and we are in kind of, I'd say, getting close to the home stretch at this point. This was a key study session to get directions on different aspects of the ordinance. We are now moving forward with updating the 2 key documents, which are the update to the historic preservation ordinance, as well as the historic citywide context statement. We will be publishing those. Our approximate schedule is end of February, beginning of March, we'll publish updated documents. And then our goal is to have a public hearing before the Planning Commission. We're tentatively looking at the second meeting in March. And then that would put us on track to bring it to council second meeting in April. Obviously, that's subject to change as things get closer, but that's kind of our schedule now. And that would get us to the point where we can see if council wants to take action and then have an updated ordinance to work with.
Great. Are there any reports and announcements from my fellow commissioners? Nope. All right. Seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I have to talk to you about your, I remember that. I had this vague memory that that's what you were doing, and I didn't remember if it was U of O.